Hey everybody, Josh Hannabury here, Truck Focus Podcast. First off, hope you're having a really good day. So years ago, when I was really diving into the personal development space, I heard a quote that says, "What you do today can greatly improve your tomorrow." So when we invest in ourselves today, the likelihood of tomorrow being great is much higher. So investing in ourselves, that can definitely look different. But in today's conversation, it's all about our industry investing into a safer tomorrow. So in British Columbia, they recently integrated MELT into their commercial driver training programs. So MELT stands for mandatory entry-level training that all new drivers must go through in BC in order to obtain their Class 1 or Class 2 driver's license. So today's episode, I'm really excited to interview Andy Roberts. So Andy's the owner of Mountain Transport Institute, or MTI, which is definitely one of industry's best training schools based out of Castlegar, BC. So in this episode, Andy really highlights different parts of his journey and how that's really helped him tune in with his own training school. Talks about the challenges he's seen over the years, as well as the pros that MELT will bring to industry as it's getting introduced right now. So one of my favorite quotes from Andy during this interview is when he talks about the why and keeping the why in mind when you're training. So why are drivers being trained? What do they need to know to be successful in their career? So I think that's super important. But another thing that he highlights is the why and how it impacts a carrier. So what a carrier believes that a driver needs to know coming out of training. So again, it's super exciting. So this episode will be a great listen for those in the industry or looking to get in the industry from a driver's perspective, but also carriers' perspectives, wondering how are we going to just continue to hire on really good drivers, especially those coming straight out of training school. So again, this is going to be a really good episode. So I highly recommend that you learn more about Mountain Transport Institute simply by visiting www.drivemti.com. Well, let's get to it. Hey, good day, Andy. Welcome to the Truck Focus Podcast. Super excited to have you here.
Good morning, Josh. It's a great day to be here, and we're heading to winter, but we're not there yet.
That's right. Yeah, just a little dusting of snow, I guess, is what we can anticipate. So, so again, I'm super excited for today's episode. A lot of people kind of I'd say our inner circles are really aware of our conversation regarding MELT, so mandatory entry-level training conversations, new drivers, all that. So I'm really excited just to see what we'll dive into today. So why don't you kind of start us off and highlight who is Andy?
So Andy is a guy that's been in love with trucks for probably since I was 13, and became a driver at 19 years old, got into the industry. Took a while to get into the industry. Back in those days, everybody wanted you to have 2 years experience, but you couldn't get 2 years experience because you couldn't get a job. So ended up buying a truck to get in the industry myself, and I've been trucking ever since. As you'll see today, I like talking about trucks. So partway through my career, I became an air brake instructor back in 1992 and was teaching air brakes for a community college. Really enjoyed it. So started a driving school in 1998 and located in Castlegar, BC in the mountains. And really, this is where I grew up. And this is some of the toughest trucking that you'll do. And if you can drive here, you can pretty much drive anywhere. So we really enjoy teaching out of here. It's challenging. I think our best students come out of our winter classes, honestly, learn to drive in the mountains in the winter. So over the years, the school's grown, and we've been teaching some full-time training courses since probably 2003. And very excited to see MELT finally implemented in British Columbia, and it's going to level the playing field for the driver training industry, and it's going to help people turn out better entry-level drivers, and it's going to make the highway safer for our families. I think there's just a whole bunch of positives to this whole thing.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, I appreciate that. So when you first started trucking, when you had your own rig, what were you hauling?
I did a lot of work in the wood chip residual business. So I started out hauling chips, and I hauled fuel, worked in the fuel industry for a couple of years. I've done some general freight stuff, paved for a season, plowed snow for a couple of winters. So, but most of my stuff circles back, did some flat decking down to the coast. but yeah, most of my stuff circles back to the forest industry.
Nice.
And so just regional work throughout most of my career.
Awesome. Yeah, it makes sense being in Castlegar too. It's you're right though, winter training and some of the toughest driving, honestly, especially in Western Canada. So those that aren't familiar with the geographic where Castlegar is, and I might miss a town, but I'm from Kelowna, so I'm, I guess, a little west. Maybe is that south or west of Castlegar, just down 33?
You're west and a little bit north, but
Oh, north. Okay, yeah.
yeah.
And I remember, yeah, Rock Creek and Beaverdale. I remember Grand Forks. I remember Castlegar. I'm not a fan of driving to Nelson, and it's yeah, it's just a different, a different experience. So you're absolutely right, especially in
Yeah.
logging. Obviously, going from mud, if you can even call it mud road, to asphalt is lots of fun there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of different challenges. So
Totally.
different challenges than what you find on the freeway and on interstates down south. But we just found that our students, because they have to learn to look well ahead and anticipate, slowing down for turns and stuff, that all of those skills transfer well onto the freeway, right? And looking well ahead and those sorts of things. So they tend to transition well back into the big city stuff, off of the narrow 2-lane highway, 50-kilometer-an-hour corner stuff. So it all works out in the end.
Yes. Yeah. Awareness for sure. Depth perception, animals, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
good. So you mentioned that you started training air brakes first, and then you started your training school shortly thereafter. But what kind of took place in your own mind from being an owner operator to thinking, you know what, I want to train, and then starting a training school? How was that journey?
Well, there wasn't a school here, and I mean, over the years, the local community college had done some training, but they had closed it down, and they were bringing a gentleman in from out of town a couple of times a year, sort of thing, and that sort of stuff. But it was, I think it was just, I had a vision that I could do a better job than what was being done by a lot of other schools, and that most people were going to the city to get trained, and then they'd come back here and they had absolutely no experience in the mountains. And so yeah, I guess the businessman side of me saw the opportunity, or the entrepreneur side.
Yes.
And so it's what are we now, 23 years, 23 and a half years probably that we've been running. So apparently it's worked out, I guess.
Good. Yeah, that's a long legacy. And we'll dive into legacy a little later, but knowing the amount of lives you've impacted and the domino effect of the amount of, so you train a student, they have a blossoming career, and the trickle effect of that, that's super rewarding. And yeah, really well done. So when you started, so it's Mountain Transport Institute, sorry.
Yeah.
MTI. So when you first started, was it class 1, class 3 that you're getting into, or how did you start? And then can you kind of dive into what all do you train now?
So when we started, it was basically 1 truck, 1 trailer. So class 1 and 3, we didn't do any buses or anything like that. So it was one of those things where we just kind of got going out of there. And that was the focus. It was a one-man show, right? I answered the phone, I taught the air brake courses, I did the in-truck instruction, and just sort of grew from that point on. Now I don't know, we have probably 4 trucks and 5 or 6 trailers in the yard that we use for training. We have other stuff too that works, and there's 5 of us instructors. We do 1 through, we just started teaching car stuff last year because the local car school closed down. So we do 1, 2, 3, 4. We do buses now as well, have done for quite a while. And we also do car driver training. So one of my complaints for years was the business model is great, except you don't get repeat customers, right? Once you help someone get their class 1 license, they don't come back next year to do it again. So now that I have a 5-7 school, I can hopefully get some repeat customers. So I'll teach them how to drive cars, and 4 or 5 years later, maybe they'll come back and get a higher class license. But
smart.
So
very smart. That's a good growth strategy for sure. And yeah, you're right. It's hard when you bring the best service and the referral is to their friends, but not necessarily them coming back. But yeah, that's a good growth strategy for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, good for you. No, that's awesome. And then, sorry, how many instructors you said you have now?
So there's 4 full-time and 5 and 1 part-time right now.
Nice, nice, good for you.
And
Yeah,
always looking to add new people. So it's as we know, it's hard to find good drivers. It's even harder to find people that want to be instructors. And it's an interesting thing, because I think there's a lot of people out there. I'm just going to steal this for an ad for a second.
yes.
I think there's a lot of people out there that have had to teach somebody to drive, right? So they had to teach their cousin or their wife or whatever while they're working. And that's got to be the most frustrating thing. You're either trying to haul a load and deliver on time, or it's you worked all week and now it's Saturday morning and you just don't want to be in the truck, and you're trying to teach someone to drive, and you don't actually have a system for teaching them to drive. So being an instructor is actually very rewarding. You have to remember now that the person sitting beside you is paying the bills, not the load that you're trying to deliver. And of course, we have a very structured system for how you teach somebody to drive. So we help people get their instructor licenses, we help them learn our system, and we help them be successful that way. So it is definitely it's definitely an opportunity for somebody that has got lots of experience, wants to pass that knowledge along, be home every day, get paid by the hour, and just, whether it's a part-time gig or a full-time gig, or they want to do training and driving or whatever. But yeah, that's there's every school in the province is always looking for good people. So
Awesome. Yeah, I'll spread that word too, for sure, because I can think of 2 people off the top of my head. They're 45 minutes for me here in Alberta, but they have been so influential in my life and my career in this industry, where they've often, man, I'd love to train. Oh, I'd love to be this. But hearing you say that, I think is really reassuring for those listening, because there's a lot of really good people out there that good expertise. And you're right, they have been on the job trainers unofficially. So being in that position, yeah, I can see the benefits for sure. But I'll definitely spread that message. So so to get to a point where you had your systems, did that come just through trial and error for yourself? Did that come through observing industry and seeing certain people don't know how to do this, so I'm going to add it to my training? Or what kind of led you to build really strong systems for students and trainers?
Well, I think it started with how I was trained as an instructor. So I went to a school in Vancouver to do my instructor training. Back then it was Shawnee Driving School, which is no longer in business. And a gentleman I worked with was Sandy Ross. And so when Sandy trained me as an instructor, I basically, at that point, that was all I knew, right? So I took their system and I used, initially for teaching people how to shift and teaching people how to turn corners and some basic stuff like that, right? And then it's just evolved over the years, right? With the addition of new people and new ideas, and you come across a problem that a student's having and you go, okay, how are we going to address this? How are we going to teach this? So it's all the material we have, whether it's coupling and uncoupling or pre-trip or how to turn a corner with a 53-foot trailer on, all of that stuff has evolved over the last 23 years. Haven't been a lot of changes probably in the last 10 to 15 years, but still, we tweak things once in a while, and it's funny things like in the old days, your turn signals would work when the ignition was off, but the newer trucks, they don't. So all of a sudden you had to change the pre-trip slightly, because we used to check the right signal before we went underneath, but then you'd have to leave the key in the ignition, and you don't want the key in the, and it's crazy stuff like that. So there's always things are always evolving as you go along, but it's really being in tune with what your student needs and the customer. And this is always a funny one, because as much as someone comes to me and pays me money to teach them to drive, at the end of the day, my customer is the carrier. If I don't turn out a product that they're willing to hire, then I haven't done what my customer hired me to do, right? So somebody pays me money to learn how to drive. I need to give them the skills to be successful in the industry, to be safe in the industry, and to be desirable to an employer. Yeah. So you always got to look beyond the obvious of, yeah, this is how you shift a gear, to, okay, this is why you don't park like this and plug up the fuel island or whatever it happens to be, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's a smart approach, because I think a lot of carriers question not the training school, but possibly the trainer. When I've met enough new drivers in my day, I remember what it was like when I was a new driver, and I went from a class 3 to a class 1, and both times the training was, we'll get into hours and a melt here shortly, but was not that. And I was just a good talker, so I was able to talk my way through things when I had zero ability. So even like mentioning the fuel island to parking on a site, basically pulling over off to the shoulder so you're actually a safe distance away from getting creamed by another vehicle, very important. So it's nice to hear that you're training those things with the student in mind, but also the carrier in mind, who's ultimately buying the end product. I like that approach for sure. Yeah. So, okay. So then we'll kind of dive into Melt a little bit. So we mentioned it initially, but why don't you start us off now with, can you kind of give us an overview? What is Melt? And then we'll kind of navigate through there.
Okay. So mandatory entry-level training has been in Canada in some jurisdictions for a while. So of course, it's an interesting system here. We have the National Safety Code, which is 16 different 16 different sections that's published by the federal government, but basically it's enforced by the provinces. So the provinces have to adopt the 16 standards into their legislation and stuff like that. So MELT became so Ontario started MELT initially, and then after the Humboldt incident, the federal government passed standard 16, which is ELT, entry level training. Not all provinces have adopted it. And so I believe we've got Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, BC. Well, basically we're talking on Saturday, October 16th, and it basically is mandated to start on Monday, the 18th of October in British Columbia. So obviously lots of people have opinions on MELT. Myself, I think it's overall it's an excellent initiative. There's going to be some people that get caught up in it that arguably, you know, they're going to complain. The farmers, I've driven tractors all my life, I've driven trucks on the farm, all those sorts of things, and I don't disagree with that. But the problem is that as soon as you start to make exceptions, the whole program breaks down, and Ontario proved that early on. They had some advanced standing stuff for people with class 3s and different things like that, and it created a bunch of loopholes. Anyway, in BC, there's no, it's all, you're in or you're out. If you want a class 1 license as of next week, you're going to have to take a mandatory entry level training program from an approved school that'll have approved instructors and all of those sorts of things. So I think in the big scheme of things, it's an excellent program. British Columbia has set the minimum mandatory entry level training is 140 hours minimum. That's a combination of classroom, yard, all what they call off-road. And off-road is basically all your backing skills, and on-road training as well. So schools are welcome to design courses that exceed the minimum. Our course is 169 hours. The course does not include your road test. So the road test time is on top of that 140. So the road test in BC is 2 hours. So there's at least an additional 2 hours on top of that. I think the meat and potatoes of the program, though, is the skills evaluations and the written evaluations. So there's 3 written evaluations on the theory portion of the program. Students that are, and those evaluations are provided by the BC government. You have to achieve 80% on those. And then there's 13 skills evaluations that you have to pass twice. So we're not just backing in a straight line anymore. We now have to we have to do a sight side and a blind side alley dock. We have to do a sight side and an offside like a lane change backup. We have to do our straight backing. So there's a minimum of 5 different backing skills now. And of course, you got to do pre-trip, and you got to do chain up and couple and uncouple. And then you do a 2-hour mountain and highway driving skills evaluation and a 2-hour urban driving skills evaluation. And you got to pass all of those 2 different times. So providing the schools are following the criteria and measuring at the right level, it should turn out a much better entry-level driver than we've potentially had in the past. So it's not a case of everybody's going to get done in 140 hours. Some people are going to need more than that in order to get through those skills evaluations twice. So I just really hope that the schools are going to maintain the level of competency, right? If the bar is set too low, then that's exactly the result we'll get. And that kind of brings up a bit of an interesting story. We were talking earlier, and we got involved in the Canadian Trucking Human Resources Earning Your Wheels course back in 2003. Similar idea. It was a 8-week program, mix of theory and yard and stuff, and we had skills evaluations there as well. So when we first got involved, that program required 95 hours behind the wheel for the students. And when we first started back in 2003, our class 1 course was only 35 hours. So we're looking at almost triple the hours. So as a group of instructors, we were excited, like, we're going to turn out some good students here. This is going to be awesome, right? And we got to the end of the first course. We had 3 students in the first course. And we kind of looked at each other at the end and went, they're not that much better. How come? And the reason they weren't that much better is, as instructors, we didn't ask them to be. We didn't raise the bar. We didn't challenge. We did all the same things we'd been doing in the 35-hour course. And they were really good at those things, but they hadn't gone to the next level because we hadn't challenged them to go to the next level. We hadn't given them the tougher backing maneuver or the heavier trailer in the mountains or whatever the case may be. So that was a huge wake-up call for us. And that's going to be a huge learning curve for some of the schools in British Columbia. Is here they are on Monday with this new course and all these extra hours. If they don't do something with those hours other than the same thing they've always done, the students aren't going to be any better. So the challenge comes to the instructors out there to figure out how they're going to step it up, figure out how they're going to, okay, we're good at this. Now, how are we going to make them better? How are we going to find that tighter turn or that steeper hill or that tougher backing maneuver? What are the things we're going to do that when you started as a driver, you didn't know, like going through scales and going to card locks and all of that stuff, right? So it's the students are there. The students are going to pay good money for this program. The students are going to be interested in being the best they possibly can. And really, as instructors, it falls back to us to be the ones to challenge them. And the students only going to do what you ask them to do.
Yes.
Right. They don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
So
yes. Huge. Yeah. And I think that's a really good takeaway too, for those that are training is, challenge. You have the extra time, so use it to challenge and not just expect the same old, because then you're going to get the same old. And no, that was a fantastic overview. And I appreciate that, because I think a lot of people, like, again, we're on similar Facebook groups and you hear a lot of interesting comments, and it's not the wins, it's always the complaints. So I like hearing the win side, and I like hearing the backstory of your success side, because you were an integral person and company to drive Melt into BC, which I really appreciate, because I think there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of naysayers that don't get it. So it's nice to hear your perspective. So again, let's raise the bar. I like that for sure. So 2 things you said earlier too that kind of piece together is, one, if carriers' confidence potentially could go up in the product, as in the new drivers that they're hiring? And two, do you believe that melt will have a positive impact on road safety? Like, I know that's a big part of the design of the program.
I think that just to be clear, we're not gonna have a student walk out of our place, jump into a truck and drive down the street and get a load. The carriers are still going to need to do their part on the finishing, right?
Yes.
As a driver training school, we can only teach the stuff that's general to trucking. So I don't have time, even as long as this course has become, I still don't have time to teach the specifics of running a refrigerated trailer or running a logging truck or any of that stuff. So the employers still have to recognize that you're still getting raw material in the door from the perspective of, you now need to, do your onboarding process and all that stuff, and send them out with a coach mentor to learn the finer points of loading and unloading and dealing with shippers and receivers and all that stuff, and border crossing and things. But anyway, so I think the potential is there to have a much better, the potential's there for the highways to be safer, to have a much better student coming out of the door. But there's been challenges in other jurisdictions where there hasn't been enough enforcement. So some of the schools that are just there to make a fast buck, now they'll take the extra money and they'll deliver the extra hours, but they won't necessarily follow the criteria. And the student doesn't, again, they only go to school once, they don't know any better. And so the product coming out the other end maybe isn't much better than it is now. ICBC is committed, from discussions I've had from them, ICBC is committed to monitoring road test results. So the actual road test, so it's kind of an interesting I guess it's an interesting system in BC. The MELT program actually belongs to the Ministry of Highways and Infrastructure. ICBC's road test hasn't changed. So you have to complete the MELT program and have a certificate saying you've completed the MELT program in order to book a road test. The road test is going to be exactly the same as it was before MELT. So in theory, if we're measuring at the level we should be measuring at, the students will have been measured to a higher level to pass MELT. And other than the odd student that gets nervous, the road test should be a slam dunk,
right?
It shouldn't be an issue. It should just be knock it out of the park. So one of the key indicators for ICBC is going to be going forward is the pass fail rates. The pass fail rates on the road test should go way up, right? I mean, I would think pass fail rates of a MELT student should be in the 95 percentile, right?
Yes.
Because they should have been measured at a much higher level. And you're always going to have the odd thing go sideways. So I think the first indicator ICBC is going to be looking for is who's failing and what school did they come from. And the students will always be tied back to the school that issued them their certificate. So if there's a handful of schools in the province and their pass fail rate hasn't come up and it's low, then they're going to get visited. I believe ICBC is planning on visiting all the schools and sitting in on some of the classroom and some of the yard stuff, and they'll be coming and going through our files and everything else. So they're committed to the monitoring piece. I think there was a news show on last week talking about Ontario only having a couple of inspectors to go around to schools, and they interviewed a school owner that had been in business for 18 years, and the only time he'd seen an inspector was the day he opened his school. Well, I see inspectors at least once a year, so yes. And I'm out of the way. But so I think it's going to be different here. I know ICBC is committed to monitoring and following up on the program, and they have the staff in place to do it, the driving school inspectors. And so there's I'm hopeful that they're going to follow through.
Yes.
And that there's going to be humps and bumps for the first 6 to 12 months for sure. But I would hope a year from now, if we talk again, that we will see stuff in place, possibly some schools that lost their MELT certification, and that that we're heading in the right direction, and we'll have some employers saying, hey, we've gotten some students that are much better. And a much better student, again, allows the carrier to develop, and it just translates into safer roads as we go along.
Yes. Yeah, I really hope ICBC does hold schools accountable, and that could be from a pass-fail rate, that could be from an equipment standards rate. And I remember when we first talked, like off camera a couple of months ago, and we were talking about the equipment shortage and the fact that Melt has specific equipment requirements. I reached out to my friends at International that I work super closely with, and I was just like, I know you guys are up against like the challenges that we're all up against, from parts delays and all this good stuff. This could be a really big problem. And they were like, wow, yeah, you're right. So I think that will be part of it. So hopefully ICBC really holds schools accountable just to having safe equipment that meets the standards. But then I think, yeah, the school itself. So if you have an inspector sitting in on a class, that's a little nerve-wracking too. So I think, yeah, all of those things, like I said, 6 to 12 months from now should really improve the entire process. And yeah, again, when you're training someone at a fuel card lock, if you're training someone how to cross the scale and deal with law enforcement, a carrier will appreciate that too, because yes, that's part of your onboarding, but if a driver is confident, I know where my paperwork is, or I know my e-log's good, and I know that I did a thorough pre-trip inspection because I was trained properly, yeah, there's a lot of wins there. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, and I mean, there's things in the curriculum or in the learning outcomes, such as logbook completion. Like basically the student needs to complete a logbook every day they're in course. Our students have always done that, but I know a lot of schools have never had them complete one, never mind taught them a logbook course. So they do have the option of using electronic, but at the end of the course, they should have a record, either paper or electronic, of all the hours that they were in the program. So and that's just I mean, we do logbooks every day. Why would you leave driving school not knowing how to do it?
Exactly. Yes. No, I think that's really smart. And it's something, Andy, that you've always portrayed, which I really respect, is confidence. This is the right direction, confidence that they need to know that. So it's nice, again, in this interview, when we were not on actual recording, just hearing this is a good thing. This is a good thing because, again, there's enough negative noise out there where we need to listen to Andy, and we need to listen to what you're portraying and the benefits of this, because you're right. We fill a logbook out every day, time exempt or not. So you need to know how to do it. You need to know how to sign your pre-trip document properly and actually identify a defect, not just, well, I think it's fine. But yeah, I think those are huge wins for sure.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting part of the pre-trip is as the students go through their pre-trip on their skills evaluations, part of the pre-trip is they have to be able to tell you if this was broken, whether it would be a defect or a major defect. So whether it just be a defect that got noted in the pre-trip, or it would be an out of service defect, I can't move the vehicle. That's included in the pre-trip in BC now for the MELT program. So, and again, that was driven by the advisory board of the carriers going, we get people coming to work for us that don't know what a defect is. We don't have, that's something a driver should know. You should know. So it's great. You found the light was out. Can you drive the vehicle? Well, no, it's the rearmost left turn signal. The vehicle's out of service, so you need to get it fixed, right? And so, yeah, so there's lots of really neat stuff in there like that that's going to challenge us as instructors and as schools, and it's going to challenge the student. But when they get out to work, they're going to have the confidence to know, say, hey, sorry, dispatch, this vehicle's out of service till I get this repaired.
Huge. So is that part of the reasoning then why your training is 169 hours and not the 144, or sorry, 140?
No, we felt some of our extra hours are classroom, and actually now that we've delivered our first course, we're probably going to stretch our classroom a little bit longer. We just felt we didn't have enough time allotted for the theory portion to cover what needed to be covered. So we added some time in there. We added some more driving hours and some more backing hours as well. Again, based on the course is very structured as far as how many hours you have to pull a loaded trailer, how many hours you have to pull an empty trailer, how many hours you can drive bobtail. Most of our extra hours on the driving side are actually bobtail hours, because we spend, I think we probably spend longer than anybody teaching shifting. because, oh, by the way, this program has to be taught on a standard, on a non-synchronized transmission. So we find that if we look at the shifting as like the foundation of the house, right? So if we can get their shifting, upshifting, downshifting, shifting uphill and downhill to a acceptable level bobtail, then that's the foundation of the house. And as we add a loaded trailer and we go steeper hills and things further down the course, if that's the basics are solid, then it's easy for them to adapt to a heavier trailer and steeper grades and stuff like that. So our students, when they leave, they can upshift and downshift, up and down hills. Like you need to know how to make a downshift on an 8% grade going downhill. If you pick the wrong gear, you need to be able to downshift. Anyway,
Yes.
So we added extra hours because the criteria only allowed didn't allow as many hours bobtail as we felt we needed. So that's one of the reasons that we added some extra time into our course as well. And it's going to evolve, right? It's, we've done one and we've already seen where we're going to make some changes, and we'll, every course for the next 3 or 4 courses, we'll come out of there going, we need to tweak this, we need to tweak that. But sort of 6 months in, we should have probably settled into a model that's going to be pretty solid for us.
Yes. Yeah, I like that, the foundation of the house, because you can tell who probably got their license or only drove auto and now they're driving a standard because of the sounds and the smoky brakes and just I saw
cab.
Oh yeah, just like, and it's, yes, it's their fault, but no, it's not their fault in the sense that the carrier shouldn't be allowing them to operate a standard if they're only trained in auto. But anyway, yeah, I like that. I like that mentality, and it's nice to know that you guys are. This is great. Okay, we can adjust. Okay, this is great. Okay, we can adjust, because there's, as you know too, there's a lot of people that say, no, this is it. This is it. Just stick to what you know, and it's like you're going to get the same result. So let's improve. So I really respect that for sure. Yeah. So you mentioned cost. Obviously, there's going to be more of a cost for 140 plus hours compared. Like, I think I did my class 1 in 8 hours, 9 hours, something like that, including the road test. Like, yeah, not not what I'm sure you like to hear. I don't drive anymore, so that's okay. But I still have my class 1. But when we're talking costs, and we're talking if there's any programs to help with costs, can you kind of walk us through what the cost would be for a MELT class 1, as well as, do you know of any, is there, I don't know if it's like WorkSafe that provides funding, or if there's any funding programs out there right now since the program is new?
So I don't know everybody's costs. I mean, most, my program is just shy of 16 grand, and I'm 173 hours with road tests. So I think I'm 15,850 plus 300 for books, or 15,750 plus 100 registration. Anyway, something like that. Oh, you can tell I don't do that. I don't do the sales side. So it's up there, and I think there's a lot of other courses that are up in the sort of $14,000-15,000 range. I don't know what the low end is. I'm sure there'll be some schools in the Lower Mainland that will they're in the habit down there, I think, of competing on price. So I'm sure there'll be some places that will be less money. But I think, again, people need to, I always tell people, don't believe me, talk to the employers. And if you want to go to XYZ truck driving school, phone the employers and see if they'll hire you when you come out the other end. What schools do they like to hire from? What schools do they recommend? And make sure that you're getting value for your money. It's in the old days before MELT, $5,000 course could actually be really expensive because you didn't actually learn anything.
Yes.
You just kind of flush that down the toilet and away you went, right? So,
yes.
so yeah, it's definitely important that way. As far as funding goes, so WorkBC administers the any of the EI funding. That's usually a combination of federal and provincial money. And for a number of years now, we've had a $7,500 cap on tuition fees in British Columbia. That's not changing at this point in time. So, I mean, on the face of it, you're going to, if you're on EI, you can potentially access close to 50%, I guess. Usually, and again, I'm no expert at this, so go run in somewhere and tell them that Andy said this, but I believe that on top of the 7,500, you can usually get some funding for books, and in some cases you can get some funding for travel and living out expenses. But I think that's a case by case basis, and it varies with different offices, different programs. BC and Canada student loans, typically the program needs to be 12-week long. So most of the MELT courses, my course is 7 weeks plus the road test week, so about an 8-week course. We also have what we call a platinum version of our program, which is an extra 20 hours of driving and then a mentorship with a carrier. So that program ends up at 12 weeks long. So that does qualify for student loans. One of the challenges with student loans is student loans has a cap of so much tuition per week. And that cap is typically designed around classroom style courses, not truck driver or excavator or airplane learning to fly courses where you have one instructor, one student, and one piece of equipment, right? Which makes it very expensive. So there's generally a limited amount of funds available there. Depending on the schools, you can go through, you can try and get a student loan credit at your bank. You can usually withdraw money if you have a RESP. That'll usually apply to most schools. If you have an RRSP or your spouse does, you can take out up to $10,000 tax-free as long as you put it back within 2 years, as long as it's going for tuition. And there's some private funders out there as well. Interest rates will be very high on that stuff. And it's really important to go to your Work BC office, even if you don't think you qualify for anything, because your local Work BC office they're the experts at all the funding that's available. So I think that in the next 6 months, there's potentially going to be some carriers that are going to support people with tuition, obviously with a signed employment contract in return and a loan process. The who does it, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be carriers that need people. It's all those sorts of things. So it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves.
Yes.
We the challenge is that if I'm going to invest, if I'm a carrier and I'm going to invest in you as a potential new employee, how do I know that you can actually drive a truck? How do I know that you have the ability to multitask and make decisions and the stamina to work a 60 or 70 hour week and potentially be away from your family and sleeping in a truck and all the cool stuff that we get to do, right? Yeah. Working shift work and all that. So it's going to be difficult. Like, everybody goes, oh, they got lots of money. Well, sure. Okay. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they didn't get to where they are today by making stupid investments.
Yes.
So for somebody that wants an employer to pay, and I had this conversation with a gentleman off Facebook the other night. If you want to expect an employer to loan you money for tuition, put yourself in their shoes for a minute. What guarantees do I have, A, that you're actually going to be able to do this, and B, that you're actually going to come and stay working for me? Because even the employment contract is a bit of a slippery slope as far as enforcement. If I'm going to sell you a car and you don't make a payment, I can take the car back and resell it. If I'm going to loan you money to get your driver's license and you quit and go somewhere else, or you don't pay me back, I got nothing to repossess.
Yes.
I can't take your license away. I can't get those lessons back. So from a risk perspective, it's a huge risk. I think that one of the things that we're just in the process of developing is sort of an assessment process. So as an experienced instructor, I can take you for a couple of days, teach you pre-trip, take you on a couple of driving lessons, we got a few other things that we'll add in there. And in a couple of days, we'll have a very good, probably accurate to 90+%, whether you're going to be successful or not. So that's a piece that we're putting in place that we're going to go to carriers with and go, okay, if you're looking at funding somebody, why don't you send them to us? We'll do this assessment. The assessment's going to cost $500. And now we can say, yeah, you know what? There's a very high likelihood this person's going to be successful. No, this person might be successful, but they're going to need a whole bunch of extra hours. Or, you know what? Truck driving just might not be in this person's wheelhouse. And honestly, there's not many people like that. But we do see a percentage of students that need additional training time because they are lots of different reasons. But we really have to pay attention to the square peg round hole syndrome, where you run up against schools and run up against instructors that go, well, I only have this much time. Well, no, we're not being hired to take that square peg and jam it into the round hole. We're being hired to take that square peg and finally carve it down so it fits nicely in the round hole. And sometimes that takes more time, and more time means more money.
Yes.
Right. And so, people have to recognize the 140 hours is a minimum. That at the end of the 140 hours, if you haven't completed all the skills evaluations successfully and the theory tests and everything else, you're going to need more time. And that's the other thing when people are comparing courses, is not like I said, mine's 173. Other people are trying to stick to 140. Some people are at 150. So even though we have the same basic playbook, we're still a little bit different in apples to oranges some of the way along there. So did I answer that question, or did I just go right off?
It was awesome. Yeah. So the biggest takeaway is there's options and there's thoughts behind it. I love the assessment offer, and I really, I support it. I would help drive that to carriers, because speaking on behalf of carriers, you're right. They're going to say, well, I don't know. Can you even do this? Can you actually handle a 60 to 70 hour week? And you went to Texas. Can you actually, brand recognition is huge right now, especially with the power of social media. Can you stay upright when the wind is there? Do you know when to stop because you're tired? All of these things, great questions, valid questions. So putting a potential driver that a carrier is going to invest 15, 16,000 into, to have them go through an assessment and an actual detailed report of their strengths. Yeah, there's this, they have really good attitude, all of these things. Huge, 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 because it's protection on the investment. Where, yeah, if you're just kind of going in blind, and I don't know too many people that are just going to be writing out checks and go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. They're not going to be in business very long if they do that. Right.
Yeah, but I think you did answer it for sure. But the biggest takeaway is, especially to students, is there's options, and you got to ask. And I wasn't familiar. So you called it the Work BC office. I wasn't familiar with that, but I'll make sure I add that to the show notes too, because again, when people are grumbling because they don't know, okay, well, let's give them what they need to know. So I think that's super important. And then, so kind of mentioned it earlier, you've really hit it home, honestly, lots throughout our interview, which I really appreciate. But I talk about legacy all the time. I talk about, it's a daily effort. Like when you enter a room and you leave a room, how did you impact those people? So you have a really unique opportunity every day, not even experience, but opportunity every day. And again, from our consistent conversations, I can tell you really own this space, but you're always trying to better people. You're trying to make people see kind of a bigger picture, let's improve some skills. I'm actually going to train you stuff. So when you're living out the course of your day, and your trainers too, this is a question for them as well, but do you think about legacy? And do you think about, this person knows me now, 5 years from now, what are they going to remember? Do you think about that kind of stuff? And if so, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think so. I think we think about what are the extras that we add in versus, this is how you shift from second to third, or whatever. What are the extra pieces that get added in that we know are going to benefit them when they're out there working? And tying the training back to the why, right? Why are we teaching you this? We're not, our why is never to pass a road test. We're just not interested. If I've taught you to drive, then you should be able to pass any road test in the country. So I think for us, the why and the legacy piece becomes when that student is standing at the side of the road, spun out in a snowstorm at 3 o'clock in the morning, do they actually understand, yeah, we showed you how to put on chains, but now that you're on a side hill and we showed you when you roll your chains on a side hill, you need to set them off to the side a little bit so they roll on straight. It's those sorts of things. And you get calls from students or emails from students over the years going, I really, I was this and this and this happened, then I heard your voice, or I heard Mike's voice, or I heard, whoever's voice. And so that's the stuff that makes a difference. And ultimately down the road as it goes along is the referrals, whether it's a relative or whether it's a friend or whatever it is. And having people on that we've trained on Facebook, comment on our stuff and support us and things like that is all part of it, right? So I think that and I mean, we're in a fairly small community, and although there's lots of trucks here, but we have lots of you look around and you wonder some days how many of the drivers that are working here have actually come through our school. And it's always interesting, and some days I feel bad because someone will come up and start talking to me and I know they were a student and I don't remember their name because there's been too many students.
Yes.
But they remember mine because there wasn't too many instructors. So
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's huge. I think you're doing a really good job with that too, Andy. And it's nice to see where we were talking off camera, but well, Shelley with Women's Trucking Federation of Canada, we were talking last night, and when I mentioned that we were going to have a conversation today, she lit up, and I'm like, that's huge. That type of impact, when other industry leaders recognize just the efforts that you put in, the consistent messaging, the really, really good job, like all of that really does set the tone. And then, yeah, when there's lots of students, which is a win, and they're like, hey, Andy, and you're kind of like, oh, darn, yeah, like, that's huge. I think that's super cool that you're able to impact people like that. And I think that's a great legacy. So really well done.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So kind of as we come to a close, first off, if there were any final thoughts, and then finally, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you as a person about MTI if they're interested in MELT, Class 3, refresher training, anything like that? Where's the best place for people to go?
Okay. I think, the one thing that I want to just add in, because we kind of missed it through all this, is with the BC program, there's a lot of rhetoric on the internet about, or on Facebook and places about foreign workers. With MELT in BC, anybody coming from another jurisdiction is going to be required to take MELT. So if you're moving here from the US and you've been a commercial driver, a CDL driver in the US for 20 years, you're going to have to go through MELT. If you're moving here from another province in Canada that does not have a MELT course, and you've been a driver for 10 years, doesn't matter, you're going to have to go through MELT. And all the temporary foreign workers that have been coming in for the different carriers are now going to have to go through MELT. So there is no workaround in BC. You're going to have to go through MELT, regardless of previous experience in other jurisdictions. The only people that will be able to exchange a license will be those from other MELT provinces. So Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta. And even with that, ICBC still has the right to road test them as well. So, but everybody else as of next week is going to have to go through MELT. So that's an interesting piece. I think, moving forward for us, we're really excited about this. It's like I said earlier to you, this is similar training that we've been doing for almost, probably 18 years now anyway. So it's exciting that way. It's a challenge for us. It's going to be a challenge for other schools to meet the criteria. I think, as we go along, we continue to deliver our class 2, 3, 4, our mountain training. We get people coming to us that have class 1s for a mountain course and things like that as well. Always interested to talk to people, that are looking for information. I think one of our biggest jobs from a sales perspective is not, it's not so much in selling you as much as it's in educating you as an entrant into the industry. This is what an employer expects. So make sure whoever you choose as a school is going to provide you with those skills and that sort of stuff, right? So
Yes.
As far as contacting us, obviously we have a page on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook all the time. If you need to get hold of us more quickly than that, our website is probably the best, which is www.drivemti.com. You can access our sales guys through there. Our phone numbers are there as well, whether you want to call during the week and talk to one of us as well. All of that stuff is there. And ask questions, right? Whether it's you're talking to us or another school or wherever, is talk to the employers. What schools do they hire from? What are they looking for in a driver? Ask if you can go for a ride along. Learn about the industry. It's different. It's a lifestyle. It's not just a job. And if before you spend the money, make sure that you're going to get what you want out of it. Had a conversation with a gentleman the other day. He has a young family and wants, Monday to Friday, 8 to 4:30. Well, so does everybody else. There's not a lot of jobs like that in this industry, right? It's early, it's late, it's shift work, it's go away, it's all that stuff. So make sure that your eyes are wide open coming in, and maybe you need to go class 3 and drive a mixer truck or something like that if that's what you need right now. And once your kids are grown and gone, then you can move on and fulfill your dream to be a long haul driver. But even through my career, there's a time in my career where I would have I never did it, but I would have welcomed the opportunity to go long haul. And then I had a family, and well, you couldn't pry me out of town at that point. And now my kids are both out on their own. So my priorities change again. So that's the other thing. If you choose a carrier that has more than one option, if they have local jobs and long haul jobs and regional jobs and things, so you can grow your career, and as your needs change, you don't have to necessarily change companies. You can just change to a different division within a company. There's just so much to know and so much to do. And just be cautious. I think the internet's awesome for information. Just be cautious as to who you're listening to. And there's a million YouTube videos from Billy Big Rigger from Texas. And some of that stuff is really good, and some of that stuff is just trash. So when you want valuable information, you need to go to reliable sources. Go to the manufacturers pages, go to the carriers, talk to the carriers, email them and ask them questions, right? Talk to the different schools, and make sure you're talking to reputable people and you're getting advice in a jurisdiction that's relevant to you. So it's all that stuff is important. And I think I don't know. I'm excited for 12 months from now to just see how it's evolved. There's going to be pitfalls. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be people are going to struggle, and there's going to be some successes. And I just hope that we get the funding piece sorted out. I'm really hopeful that the government comes out with a loans program. I think it's important that we're not just giving people free money to do this, that people have to be committed. They have to be willing to make an investment. They have to be willing to pay it back. As a taxpayer, I'd like to see my money reused. Let's put a bunch of money in a pot and loan it out to people. But then if we can get that money reworked every 2 years on a 2-year cycle, then I think it's huge value for everybody.
Yes.
When it's a free ride and nobody's got any skin in the game, we don't see the same quality of students. Yes. So people need an opportunity. People need a mechanism, but it shouldn't be a free ride.
Yes.
And I'm really hoping that the government can see that and we can get a loans program in place in the next 6 months or so. So maybe you get a 7,500 from EI and you borrow 8,500 from the loans program, and you get yourself started on a great career, and you can make some good money and pay it back. And maybe one day you'll be an instructor and you can come to work for one of us.
Exactly. That's a smart approach, and I agree. And I want to cut you off because I'm a sponge, so I'm gaining knowledge here, and I appreciate that. But I think you're right. When there's skin in the game, and then it's a futuristic model too, where if it's a 2-year payment plan, every 2 years that pot, well, it's a floating pot, sure, but it's getting restored plus interest, like all of that good stuff. So really, you wouldn't be in a position 4 years from now say, sorry, we ran out of money, there's no more for X. It's like, no, it's filling itself again. So yeah, I think that's a smart approach for sure. So, but yeah, Andy, honestly, you said a lot of nuggets, and that's one thing I really appreciate about just being on, I guess, the side of the camera, is I can sit here and say, I don't know it all, teach me. And you're obviously an expert in the teaching space, but it's nice to see really the why. I like how you're talking about the why, and why are you in this space? And it's just, yeah, you do a really good job representing our industry, bettering our industry. So I appreciate you hopping on today. And just, yeah, I'm super excited as well for the next 6 to 12 months, just to see, yeah, there's going to be highs and lows, but I believe that this is a good direction for sure. And it's honestly because there's training schools like yours, people like yourself, that will make it successful. So I appreciate you coming on today. This was awesome.
Right on. No problem. I enjoyed it.
Awesome, man. So,
I like talking about stuff.
Me too. So it's good. My wife's not home right now, but she often says, enough.
Yeah.
I'm like, what about this? So how about this? But yeah, it's nice. And I do appreciate your time. And I know that everyone that was listening, same thing. There's a lot of really valuable advice shared. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
On.
Awesome, man. You will have a wonderful day. Thank you again.
Yeah, you bet. Take care.
You too. Bye. Well, Andy, honestly, you knocked it out of the park, man. As I joked with off camera, I can tell you've done this once or twice, and it's just, yeah, I really feel inspired just by I would say the biggest takeaway, honestly, was just your ability to speak into the why. Why is this so important? Why will this make a difference? But on the flip side of why is the how. And how is this going to help? How is this going to make a difference? Well, it's all about raising the bar. So we need to raise the bar of the level of expectations, the type of training that we're offering. So thank you so much. So Andy mentioned honestly, so many things in this interview. I'm just super hyped, but a couple really big takeaways. So drivers coming into the industry, or maybe you're a class 3 driver looking to obtain your class 1 driver's license, you want to approach this opportunity with your eyes wide open. So what that means is you want to understand fully, what are you getting yourself into? And does this work for you as a person? Does it work for your family? Is this actually the career that you want to go for? Because a lot of what happens when you're operating behind the wheel, not so much what you anticipated when you first got into it. So different things to really consider is, who do you want to work for? And what's their expectations of you? So if you're thinking, you know what, I want to obtain my class 1 license, maybe you want to get into metal recycling. I want to haul metal bins from one city to another. I want to be home every day. You need to know those type of things going in. Or maybe you're thinking, you know what, I want to go over the road. I don't mind being gone weeks at a time. I'm going to go see North America. Incredible opportunities are there too. But again, go into the industry with eyes wide open. Another thing to really keep in mind, so this is for, again, new drivers looking to, update their licenses from a class 3 or a class 5 to a class 1, but also carriers, is the amount of investment it takes for MELT. So MELT, as we mentioned, is the mandatory entry-level training program that's getting implemented into BC on October 18th. So by the time this episode goes live, MELT will already be in place in BC. So you need to know different things. So part of it is the opportunity. Part of it is when we're talking about the depth of knowledge. So really doing your homework. So that way, when you're picking a training school, asking them questions about, okay, so how much classroom time is there? How much drive time is there? How much backing experience will I actually get? What am I going to learn during a pre-trip inspection? So if you're a brand new driver coming in, or if you're upgrading your license, really important features, but the same side. So if you're a carrier looking, okay, I want to take on a brand new driver, or my current driver who operates a class 3 for us, they're going to go get their class 1. You want to know, when you're picking your training school, are they actually going above and beyond, or are they barely meeting the bare minimums? MTI, honestly, hands down, far exceeds I would say all of the retraining requirements, the documentation records, and he just gets it. His team just really gets it. So definitely, I would highly recommend that you just consider those things when you're thinking, okay, melt, okay. When we're talking costs of melt, sure, it's a little bit more money. So there's a minimum of 144 or 140 hours versus when I got my class one, it was 8 or 9 hours. Obviously, there's going to be a greater cost, but there's lots of options to help with the cost recovery. And Andy really highlighted one point that I hope the BC government does is create some form of like a loan fund where you have, say, it's a 2-year term at X interest rate. And if you're a brand new driver and you need to take out 8,500, you have 2 years to pay it off. Perfect. And then that fund is just constantly growing. So that way more and more and more drivers can utilize it. There's also carrier options. But carriers, if you're going to be offering funding, a couple of things that you want to keep in mind that Andy mentioned again. One was an assessment. So working with guys like Andy to let them meet this driver, they'll do a quick, or maybe not even a quick, but they'll do a couple of days of assessments just to kind of see where's this driver's head at, what is their skill set right now, are they teachable, just so that way you know your investment, it's going to be going in the right direction. So I think that's super important. But again, another thing that really, really, really matters is the why. So if you're a brand new driver, you're upgrading your license, maybe you moved here from a different province or a different state, different country, and you're saying, why am I getting into training? Why do I want to become a class 1 operator? You really need to keep that in front of mind too. At the beginning, because it's a leap. You're jumping into a new opportunity, or you're jumping into a new license, or you're jumping into a melt license. But also during the process. The entire point of training is to put you in positions where maybe you're not comfortable because you've never done it before. Or maybe you've done it before, but you weren't doing it the best way possible. So again, working with guys like Andy and his team at MTI, they really they kind of comfort you while they train you, which is super cool. But same thing from a carrier's perspective. Why do drivers need melt is something to keep in mind. So that way you understand, okay, they need help with this. Okay, they need help with this. If they're currently employed and they're voicing back their opinions, perfect, keeping an open mind. So, but again, Andy, thank you so much. Just today was super powerful, and I really appreciate just the consistent leadership that you've offered industry for over 23 years in the training space. I think is incredible, but also just as our BC side of our industry really drives home the MELT program as it's integrated. You're just an exceptional leader, and I really appreciate everything you shared for today. So again, those listening, check out Andy, check out MTI, just go to Drive. So www.drivemti.com. Highly recommend that you connect with them. They are active on Facebook. I gladly share their content anytime I see it. So make sure that you check them out. Definitely worth your time. So to all of our dedicated listeners, thank you so much. I know this journey has been quite exciting, and just because for me, it's exciting because of listeners like you. So I really appreciate just your constant support. If this is the first time ever checking out a Truck Focus podcast episode, or if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. Honestly, just your time investing into us really means just the world. And I do strongly hope and believe that you got value out of today's episode. Thank you so much. If you're listening to this and you've not yet done so, sign up to the monthly newsletter. So the Truck Focus newsletter, it's released once a month, great edition. And each month we just share different industry leadership's advice to maybe it's promos, sometimes that we're going to see discounts, how-tos, lots of good stuff. So of course the link is below. And a big shout out to our friends. So Jim and Diana with the owners of Chain Pro Tool. Huge shout out to Chain Pro Tool. Just right now we are in driver chain season, tire chain season. Drivers, you're always going to be in positions, especially with snows on the hills, where you're going to have to put on tire chains. Check out Chain Pro Tool. It definitely makes it a lot easier with putting them on, but also taking them off. It's a multi-purpose tool, so you can recommend, or I highly recommend that. Of course, the link is below. So again, thank you so much, Andy. Thank you, everyone that took time to listen today. Sign up to the monthly newsletter, like and share this episode. If you're listening to this on podcast or YouTube, like, share. Really appreciate all your support. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so much again. Talk to you guys soon, and let's create a pivotal impact. Bye.